We tend to think that history is written by the victors. But what happens when a victory is so total, so decisive, that it ends up as a footnote? When a battle that literally forged an empire is almost lost to time. If I ask you to name the great naval powers of history, you'll probably say the British, the Spanish, or the Portuguese. You're picturing towering galleons, cannon smoke, and vast armadas crossing the Atlantic. But long before they ruled the waves, an Indian king commanded a fleet that would reshape the destiny of a subcontinent and dominate the Indian Ocean for a century. This isn't just a story about some forgotten skirmish. This is the story of a young king's first audacious gamble. A king who inherited a broken kingdom and dared to dream of an empire built not on land, but on water. This is the story of the Cholas and the naval clash that history nearly forgot, the Battle of Kandalur Salai. In the year 988 CE, a young king in southern India faced a choice. He could play it safe, rule his small, recovering kingdom, and live a life of relative peace. Or he could risk everything, his throne, his life, his entire dynasty, for a shot at true greatness. The path to that greatness was blocked. It was blocked by a rival kingdom, the Cheras, and more specifically, it was blocked by a single, formidable naval base, Kandalur Salai. This wasn't just any port. It was a fortress, a military academy, and the beating heart of Chera naval power. It was considered untouchable. But the young king, a man who the world would come to know as Rajaraja Chola, the King of Kings, he didn't see an obstacle. He saw an opportunity. He chose to risk it all. What happened next was a battle that wouldn't just annihilate an enemy fleet. It would launch a regional power into an imperial superpower. A victory so profound, it would be celebrated in stone inscriptions for centuries to come. This is the story of that battle. A kingdom on the brink. To get why Rajaraja's plan was so gutsy, we have to understand the world he was born into. The late 10th century in southern India was a fractured, dangerous place. The great Rashtrakuta Empire, which had dominated the Deccan plateau, was crumbling, leaving a massive power vacuum. Into this void stepped a dozen competing dynasties, the Western Chalukyas, the Pandyas, and, in the coastal region of modern-day Kerala, the Cheras. These kingdoms were locked in a constant bloody game of thrones, making and breaking alliances on a dime. The Chola dynasty, into which the future Rajaraja was born as Arulmozhi-Varman, was a shadow of its former self. Just a generation earlier, devastating invasions had shattered their kingdom, shrinking their lands to a small, insecure territory around their capital, Thanjavur. When Arulmozhi-Varman took the throne in 985 CE, he didn't inherit a mighty empire. He inherited a problem. His kingdom was weak, and he was surrounded by powerful rivals. But Arulmozhi-Varman didn't think in terms of survival. He thought in terms of conquest, and he had a vision that was radical for his time. While other kings fought over land, he looked to the sea. He knew that the future of power in southern India wasn't in its fertile plains, but in the vast blue expanse of the Indian Ocean. The ocean was the superhighway of wealth, carrying spices, gems, and textiles between Arabia, Southeast Asia, and the colossal markets of Song Dynasty China. To control the sea lanes was to control the global economy of the 11th century. His ambition was to transform the Chola kingdom from a landlocked player into a thalassocracy, a great maritime empire. But one major obstacle stood in his way: the Chera kingdom. The Cheras were a serious naval power. They, along with their allies, the Pandyas of Madurai and the rulers of Sri Lanka, formed a powerful bloc that effectively strangled Chola ambitions. This anti-Chola alliance controlled the key ports and trade routes along India's southwestern coast and the critical passage around Sri Lanka. For Rajaraja's dream of a maritime empire to ever happen, This alliance had to be broken, and the linchpin holding it all together was a place called Kandalur Salai. For centuries, scholars have debated what Kandalur Salai actually was. Was it just a naval base, a fortified port, or something more? The name Salai pops up in connection with other institutions from the period, which were often residential Vedic schools. This has led some to suggest it was a kind of university that specialized in military training. The most compelling evidence, however, comes from the Chola inscriptions themselves. A hero stone discovered in 2009 talks about Rajaraja beheading the warriors of Kandalur Salai, which points to it being a multi-purpose military institution. Think of it as a combination of a naval dockyard, a marine commando training center, and a strategic fortress, all rolled into one. It was likely located near modern Thiruvananthapuram, possibly at the ancient port of Vizhinjam, giving the Chera strategic command over trade routes. Kandalur Salai was the source of Chera naval might. Its ships protected their trade and projected their power. For Rajaraja, it wasn't just a rival base. It was a dagger pointed at the heart of his imperial dream. As long as Kandalur Salai stood, the Cholas were stuck. The sea, and all the wealth it carried, would belong to his enemies. He knew he had to act. He couldn't go around it. He had to go through it. And so, in just the third year of his reign, the young king began gathering his forces for his first and most defining military campaign. He wasn't just going to defeat Kandalur Salai. He was going to obliterate it. The storm of fire and steel. Attacking Kandalur Salai was an extraordinary gamble. This wasn't a simple border skirmish. It was a direct assault on the heart of Chera naval power. Rajaraja was a young king. His army was still rebuilding, and failure would have been a political catastrophe, basically inviting his rivals to carve up his kingdom. But the plan he came up with was as meticulous as it was bold. At this point, the Chola Navy wasn't the ocean-crossing force it would become under his son, Rajendra Chola. It was likely a mix of dedicated warships and militarized merchant vessels. The Chola advantage wasn't necessarily ship size, but organization, strategy, and elite marines. Chola naval doctrine emphasized coordinated fleet actions and amphibious assaults, landing troops on enemy shores to attack from where they were least expected. They didn't just fight ship to ship. They used their navy as a launch pad to project power onto land. As the Chola fleet sailed south towards the Chera coast around 988 CE, they were deep in enemy waters. The Cheras would have been confident. The port was heavily fortified, and their own fleet was formidable, experienced in patrolling these very waters. They probably expected a long siege, a standoff where their defenses and home turf advantage would win the day. They did not expect the sheer, overwhelming violence of the Chola assault. Chola inscriptions, while not exactly modern battle reports, paint a vivid picture. The phrase, Kandalur Salai Kalamarutta, is brutal in its simplicity. He destroyed the ships at Kandalur Salai. The Tiruvalangadoo plates, a set of copper plate inscriptions, describe the Chola fleet descending on the port on the never-decreasing ocean. The battle itself was likely a savage close-quarters affair. Ancient Indian naval warfare was often about boarding the enemy vessel and overwhelming its crew in hand-to-hand combat. Chola warships would have closed the distance fast, their decks packed with elite soldiers. As they neared, a storm of arrows would have filled the air, possibly including incendiary weapons. Fire arrows designed to set the wooden enemy ships ablaze and sow chaos. Once the ships crashed together, the fight would have turned into a brutal melee on the decks. Inscriptions talk of Rajaraja's forces splitting the Chera vessels in two and beheading enemy warriors. This suggests an attack of shocking ferocity. The highly trained Chola Marines would have swarmed the Chera ships, with their objective being total annihilation, not just victory. They weren't there to capture ships. They were there to permanently break the back of the Chera Navy. Imagine the scene. The calm port waters churned into a maelstrom of splintered wood, fire, and blood. the disciplined shouts of Chola commanders cutting through the chaos. Chera ships, symbols of a proud maritime tradition, broken and burning, sinking beneath the waves. The Chola attack wasn't just a battle, it was a message. The fight would have spilled from the sea onto the shore. As the Chera fleet was being dismantled, Chola troops would have stormed the port facilities, barracks, and training centers. The fortress that was supposed to be the impenetrable heart of Chera power was being torn apart from the inside out. The Chola forces razed the port, ensuring that even if some ships had survived, the infrastructure needed to support them was gone. The battle's outcome was unambiguous. It was a decisive, catastrophic defeat for the Cheras. Their fleet lay in ruins at the bottom of the harbor. Rajaraja's gamble had paid off spectacularly. He had crushed his greatest rival on their own terms. He returned to his capital not just as a victor, but as a legend in the making. And to commemorate this foundational victory, he adopted a title that would be etched into his inscriptions for the rest of his reign: Kandalur Salai Kalamarutta, the one who destroyed the ships of Kandalur Salai. It was a name forged in fire and steel, and it announced the arrival of a new superpower on the Indian Ocean: the empire forged by sea. The destruction of Kandalur Salai wasn't an end. It was the beginning. It was the single crack that shattered the entire Anti-Chola alliance and kicked off a chain of events that would transform southern India. The victory was more than a military trophy. It was the catalyst that put a regional kingdom on the fast track to becoming a formidable empire. With the Chola Navy crippled, the strategic balance of power in the south shifted for good. The sea lanes were now open, and Rajaraja wasted no time. The title, Kandalur Salai Kalamarutta, began appearing in his royal inscriptions from the 4th year of his reign, a constant proclamation of his power. He even named one of the main gates of the magnificent Brihadeeswarar temple he would later build in Thanjavur, the Keralantaka, meaning the gate of the destroyer of the Keralas, a permanent architectural boast of his triumph. Militarily, the fall of Kandalur Salai started a domino effect. Without their fleet, the coastal lands of the Cheras and their Pandya allies were exposed. Over the next few years, Rajaraja's army systematically subjugated the region. Inscriptions from 1005 CE state he had conquered Kolam, Kodungalur, and the Pandya capital of Madurai. The entire southwestern coast, once a wall of opposition, was now firmly under Chola control. The king who had been hemmed in now controlled the entire southern tip of the subcontinent. But Rajaraja's eyes were always on the ocean. The victory at Kandalur Salai was the key that unlocked his maritime strategy. In 993 CE, just 5 years after the battle, he launched his next major amphibious campaign, the invasion of northern Sri Lanka. The Sri Lankan kingdom had been a key ally of the Cheras and Pandyas. With their allies now weakened, they faced the full might of the Chola war machine. The Chola Navy, battle-hardened and confident, ferried a large army across the Palk Strait. They sacked the ancient capital of Anuradhapura and annexed the northern half of the island, turning it into a Chola province. This wasn't just about punishing an enemy. It was a strategic masterstroke. Controlling northern Sri Lanka gave the Cholas command over the shipping lanes that flowed around the island, a critical choke point for east-west trade. The momentum was unstoppable. The Chola war machine, fueled by the wealth pouring in from controlled trade, rolled north. Between 998 and 1004 CE, Rajaraja's forces pushed into the Deccan, conquering territories in modern-day Karnataka. He clashed with the powerful western Chalukyas, extending his empire's borders to the Tungabhadra River. The Chola Navy continued its expansion, seizing the Lakshadweep and Maldives island chains, further tightening their grip on the Indian Ocean trade routes. What began as a single, daring naval raid had, in less than 2 decades, created a sprawling empire that stretched from the Tungabhadra River in the north to the whole of Sri Lanka in the south, and from the Malabar coast in the west to to the Coromandel coast in the east. This empire was built on economic might, secured by naval power. The Battle of Kandalur Salai was a strategic investment. By breaking the Chera-Pandya-Sri Lanka alliance, Rajaraja had effectively monopolized the hugely profitable trade in spices, pearls, and other luxury goods flowing through the southern seas. Chola ports became the premier hubs for merchants from Arabia, Persia, Southeast Asia, and China. The immense wealth from this trade funded magnificent temples, a sophisticated government, and an even more powerful military. The victory at Kandalur Salai did more than just build an empire. It established a legacy. It created the naval tradition and strategic doctrine that would be inherited by Rajaraja's son, the even more ambitious Rajendra Chola I. It was the experience gained in these campaigns that gave Rajendra the confidence and capability to launch his legendary expedition across the Bay of Bengal in 1025 CE, defeating the mighty Srivijaya Empire in modern-day Indonesia and projecting Indian power further than ever before. The Chola Empire, at its height, was a marvel of its age, an economic and cultural superpower whose influence stretched across the ocean, whose temples touched the sky, and whose armies and fleets were the envy of Asia. And it all began with one battle, a single, violent, and decisive confrontation at a fortified port in southern Kerala. The Battle of Kandalur Salai was the crucible in which the Chola Empire was forged. It was a testament to the vision of a young king, Rajaraja Chola, who understood that in his era, true power flowed from the sea, not just the land. His victory was a masterclass in strategy. Identify the enemy's center of gravity and strike it with overwhelming force. The destruction of the Chera fleet wasn't just an act of aggression. It was a calculated move that unlocked a grand strategy of maritime dominance. It cleared the way for the conquest of southern India and Sri Lanka, secured control over the world's most lucrative trade routes, and laid the foundation for his son to project Chola power all the way to Southeast Asia. The echo of that victory can be read in the stone inscriptions that proudly bear the title Kandalur Salai Kalamarutta. Today, the exact location of Kandalur Salai is still debated by academics, its ruins likely buried beneath the soil of modern Kerala. Its memory has faded, overshadowed by the grander conquests that came later. But its significance is undeniable. It stands as a powerful reminder that the history of naval power isn't exclusively European. For a brilliant shining moment in history, the Indian Ocean was a Chola lake. And the key to that dominance, the event that turned the tide of history, was India's forgotten naval clash, the Battle of Kandalur Salai. If you were captivated by this forgotten chapter of history, make sure to like this video and subscribe for more stories about the empires and battles that shaped our world. Let us know in the comments what other historical events you'd like us to cover. Thanks for watching.